Hey everybody, I'm Spencer, and in this video I'm going to rank every single version of the board game Pandemic that's ever been published. Did you know that a new version of Pandemic has been published every year since 2014? Amazing! Now, I'm not going to rank Pandemic Contagion. We don't talk about Pandemic Contagion. Mostly because it's so different from the original formula, also I haven't played it. But speaking of formula, the formula of my videos require me to stop right here and ask you to reward my hard work by subscribing to this channel. You have my sincerest thanks. Now, back to the good stuff. Pandemic is such an influential cooperative game as evidenced by the many other cooperative games that borrow similar mechanics. Do some actions, the game fights back. And then the difficulty increases as the game goes on. And there are a million ways to lose and only one to win. Kind of like real life. So I ranked these based on overall experiences, memorable moments, variety, and fun factor. That being said, let's get on to number 11. Number 11 is Pandemic Rapid Response. Now wait, I realize that this is not very much like Pandemic, but it kind of is, in reverse and in real time. This is the only game on the list that does not involve Pandemic's designer Matt Leacock. Instead, Mr. Kane Klenko put his spin on it. He's known for other real-time games such as Fuse and Flatline. We love Flatline, by the way. The premise is simple. Players are on a plane flying around the world delivering supplies to countries in need, like water or medical aid. You roll dice, which will determine what you're able to do on your turn, which is also under the pressure of a sand timer. So there are some pretty frantic moments. I'm okay with frantic. I mean, I'm a parent. But I know a lot of people would rather take things slow and have more time to strategize. Anyway, this is number 11 because it is the least like Pandemic, and I haven't had any memorable experiences playing it. All right, on to number 10. Number 10 is the OG, the original game, Pandemic. It's at number 10 because it is the most boring. Now, that's relative. It's not a boring game, but compared to the 9 coming after it, well, I'd rather play any of them over this. But this one started it all, so I had to talk about it. If you don't know anything about the game, well, I don't know what to tell you. It's been around since 2008, and it soared in popularity over the past year, as of the recording of this video, because people figured, hey, I'm living in a pandemic I can't control that gets continually worse. Why not play a game with exactly the same problem? Anyway, there are 4 diseases that need cures. Each character has a special ability. You go around the world to collect cards to combine to discover cures, etc., etc. It's a game that's influenced so many others and is the reason this video exists. So, thank you Matt Leacock and Z-Man Games for the views on this video. I owe them all to you. If you've ever said, hey, I like Pandemic, but I need a version that is smaller and simpler and shorter, something that's easier to introduce fresh gamers to, then you also owe a lot to Matt Leacock and Z-Man Games. Pandemic Hot Zone North America is kind of like my first Pandemic. It's not necessarily for kids, but my 8-year-old enjoys it and understands playing it. Instead of a global pandemic, the diseases have been contained to just North America. Luckily, only 3 diseases need a cure instead of the usual 4. It's really cute, too. It's so tiny. I like this one because of its accessibility. Very easy to learn and to teach. It's a perfect entry point to cooperative games. In fact, I don't own the original anymore. This one gives me the same feel as the big guy, but less table space and other stuff. I'm really excited because soon there will be a Hot Zone Europe coming out in 2021. Maybe they'll continue doing all the continents. And then, hey, maybe this would be cool. If after all of the hot zones were published, you can combine them all to play a mega game where you have to cure diseases all around the world instead of just one continent. Another popular gaming trend that Pandemic really made popular, legacy games. In a legacy game, players will play a multi-session campaign. Over the course of the campaign, rules will change, a story will unfold, secrets will be revealed, and components will be destroyed. So, at number 8, I have Pandemic Legacy Season 2. Now, ranking the Legacy versions was very difficult. I promise, I really do enjoy them all. It's just that Season 2 is the least memorable of the 3. I can only remember 1 or 2 major plot points, and even some of the gameplay is fuzzy. But I do know it was a very enjoyable experience with an interesting story and mechanisms that really changed up the familiar concept of spreading diseases. Now we go from spreading diseases to something similar. Spreading cultists. Pandemic Reign of Cthulhu is my number 7. Boy, do I love me some Cthulhu games, as evidenced by my Cthulhu fish tank. But Reign of Cthulhu was the first true spin-off of Pandemic, and I think they did an excellent job. You have investigators going around classic Lovecraftian towns such as Arkham, Massachusetts, trying to stop the spread of cultists and seal gates to prevent the Great Old Ones from entering the world. It kind of feels like Arkham Horror or Eldritch Horror Light. The little miniatures are cool, there's some fantastic artwork, and there's always an ancient one in play which implements an extra rule that increases the difficulty. I think I enjoy this one more than other people do, but hey, I'm a sucker for a good Lovecraftian game. Number 6 is Number 0, Pandemic Legacy Season 0 to be exact. Boy, did this take an unexpected turn in the Legacies series. This is set in the Cold War era, and players are CIA agents trying to stop the spread of enemy agents. Something unique I enjoy about this one is the addition of aliases. You have a passport that lets you create 3 aliases, each with different appearances and skills. And some missions will require that you use a certain alias, which can be challenging if you're required to use the one that doesn't have some of the more helpful abilities. There's not a whole lot I can say about this one because I want to stay out of spoiler territory, but this one is definitely the most complex of the legacies, and the story has all sorts of twists and turns. As we continue to fall down this list, let's talk about Pandemic Fall of Rome. And no, I will not stop making terrible segues. As long as there are board game videos to create, I will stand my ground. And speaking of standing your ground, in Pandemic Fall of Rome, players must stand their ground and defend Rome from invading hordes, diseases, like Anglo-Saxons, Huns, Vandals, and Goths. You immediately lose if an outbreak occurs in Rome, along with the usual ways to lose. What's different in this one is the addition of dice. Normally in a Pandemic game, all you need to do to remove a cube is to be in the city and just perform an action. But here, you must have your legions with you, and you roll dice to determine if you're able to defeat the invaders. It's pretty tricky. Also, the invaders are placed on the board in an interesting way. They all begin in their respective locations and then march down the various paths towards Rome. It's a neat kind of trickle mechanism that I find fascinating. Speaking of things that trickle, BRB, I needed a bathroom break. Please excuse the bathroom humor, I don't really need to go. But you might after hearing about my number 4, Pandemic Rising Tide. Boy, do I love this one. It's another version that I think other people don't enjoy as much as I do, but that is okay. I am okay with being an individual. Rising Tide takes place during the Industrial Age in the Netherlands. As you might guess, players must stop the rising tides from flooding the regions with very colorful names. One of my favorite aspects of the game is trying to pronounce some of the names. Noodlestroop, Flavo Flavland, and Batui are just some of my favorites. Apologies to my Dutch friends, feel free to call my state Tex-Ass. Anyway, this game also has a very intriguing method of spreading cubes. Since water flows, you only add cubes to an adjacent region if one has more cubes than the other. For example, if one region has 2 cubes and the adjacent region has 0, water will flow and add a cube to the adjacent region. So you have to travel around the area building dikes to stop the flow and pumps to suck out the water. It's such a different experience, and I think that's why I enjoy it so much. Number 3 on my list features Dice Dice, baby. Pandemic the Cure is the dice version of Pandemic. Literally, like you play it and when it's over, you're like, this is the dice version of Pandemic. I don't know how else to explain it to you. You roll dice to determine your actions. You use dice to treat disease dice. You can boat to adjacent regions. You can fly to other regions. And the disease dice are pretty unforgiving. You roll those to determine which regions they go to. And of course, outbreaks can happen. And so much good stuff in the game. I lose a lot, but I don't care. I recently taught this to my 8-year-old, and we had a great time. This one gives you the potential for those stand up and cheer moments as you roll the dice and they show exactly the result you need to win the game. One might say it's the cure to boredom. 2 might say, Spencer, your jokes suck. My number 2 has almost outranked Base Pandemic on Board Game Geek. In fact, this is ranked number 100, and Pandemic is ranked number 99. Pretty close. I'm talking about Pandemic Iberia. Boy, I remember when the trailer for this version came out and I was like, what? This looks so cool. And it is. It takes place in 1848 on the Iberian Peninsula. This one's pretty neat because you are treating actual diseases. Malaria, typhus, yellow fever, and cholera. But how hard can it be? I mean, she looks happy enough. Well, it's pretty tough because you don't have modern conveniences like airplanes, and you can't cure the diseases. Instead, you must research the flora, meaning you can't ever eradicate them. But you can build railroads, which can be super helpful. And you can distribute purified water, which will slow the spread of the diseases. But it gets a million bonus points for how beautiful it is. And finally, number 1 is Pandemic Legacy Season 1. This game blew my mind. It showed me what board games are capable of in a brand new way. And the internet agrees with me because it is ranked number 2 out of tens of thousands of games on Board Game Geek. I've already talked about how these legacy games work, so I won't rehash that. But some of my most memorable moments in gaming happened during this campaign. I need to pick up a copy now and save it until my girls are old enough to play because I want to share the same experience. Plus, by then, I'll have forgotten everything, so I'll be reliving it all over again. Hey, that's my list. I hope you enjoyed the video, found it enlightening, informative, or got some value out of it, because I spent a lot of time on it. Help me out by liking it, subscribing to the channel, and maybe share it to a board game-related Facebook group, or forum somewhere like on Reddit. I'd love you forever. Finally, if you enjoy content from the Lighten Up initiative, would you consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/HeyLightenUp? There are some fun benefits for patrons starting at just $1 a month. Until next time, don't take the board game hobby too seriously, just lighten up.